Lisa,
Yes, baby girl.
when I grow up, I want to be a womanist to society.
Then so shall you be.
Hey, this is Lisa Landry. Welcome to Womanist to Society. I am in Salem, Massachusetts this morning with Marilynne Roach, prolific author, experienced very much and well-versed in the Salem Witch Trials. Thank you so much for being here, Marilynne.
My pleasure.
You have written such a huge amount
Well,
about the Salem Witch Trials, but I really want to talk about your first book to begin with. It took you 27 years?
to get it, yes, to write it and to get it published.
27 years.
Well, part of it was that when I first got the idea, which was back during the bicentennial of the American Revolution, when I first came up to Salem, really to see it, and I thought, there's a book in this, another book. There weren't a lot of witch trial books then on the Salem trials. But I researched it and I did it, and from published sources. And there was a good one that was published around that time because the bicentennial spurred all sorts of local history interest. And there was a 3-volume set of actually pretty much the WPA transcripts of the trial papers that went with the witch trials.
Okay, so wait, the WPA?
Works Project Administration from the Depression.
Okay, so we're talking...
That was the 1930s.
Right, like 40 years after-ish, kind of?
Yeah, they
these papers
transcribed it, and it was in typed form in a couple of institutions like the Essex Institute. And then it was published with notes.
Because this is back before Google. You had to get off your butt and you have to get on your bike or your bus or your broom and get down to where they keep the actual documents if you're lucky enough to have access to them, which you were.
I was, the Essex Institute, which is now combined with the Peabody Museum to be the Peabody Essex Museum, had the actual, many of the actual documents. Some of them are owned by the Superior Court of Massachusetts. Some are in the Boston Public Library's manuscript collection, and there's others here and there, because they didn't all stay in one place. Essex County owns a lot of them, and they're deposited with the Peabody Essex Museum.
Got it.
But the transcripts were in print, so they were in a number of libraries, like the one in Boston, the Boston Public Library, and I could get to that with one bus ride.
Okay.
So I took extensive notes and read everything I could find and wrote what was the first draft. I thought, oh, now I have it. Yeah. Right. So I sent it to a number of publishers who were not interested. Or they were kind of interested, but not interested
And
enough.
what year is this we're talking?
This is the 70s into the 80s.
Okay.
And boy, I don't remember when they opened now, but the Massachusetts Archives, which is manuscript documents that the state owns, moved from the basement of the State House on Beacon Hill to actual climate-controlled archival quarters in next to the University of Massachusetts in Dorchester, near the JFK Library. There was a lot of building there. There was land where the dump had been. And so the archives opened, and I had business in the neighborhood because I did illustrations for the Boston Globe newspaper. Yeah. And I went around to see what the archives had. I figured it was one thing I didn't know. Famous last words. One thing I didn't know was the name of the hangman. I mean, the sheriff is in charge, but he's not going to get his hands dirty.
Right.
So I went in and I looked up this stuff, and there were file cards. This is before Google. Cards on all this other information that I didn't know because there was a war going on with Canada, the French settlements and the English settlements, and the various Indian allies.
You mean back in when all this was happening?
Yes.
Okay.
Up before and during and after. There was a war situation.
So the colonies were at war with other people trying to come in, or the people that we were taking the land from, kind of like everybody's kind of warring. And on top of that, they're like, let's burn the women.
Well, nobody's burned. It's hanging for witchcraft. Well, the native tribes had obvious reasons to resent encroachment, and the French. It wasn't exactly whole colonies coming in or trying to come in. But the French government, beginning with the king at Versailles, wanted the English territories.
Right.
So they would send raiding parties over the border from in Maine, New York, New Hampshire area. And they got into Massachusetts at times too. So, and the privateers would take shipping, the American shipping, and steal the ships, capture the people. People would be captured in the raids or killed and taken up to Canada as hostages. They'd be sold back, or they'd be bond servants to French Canadians, or they'd be living with the different tribes, and maybe redeemed or not. So
it was just
there was a lot of
like The Walking
real
Dead.
stress.
It's just bands of people roaming around creating mayhem.
Well, it was organized mayhem. They had, military plans.
They had uniforms.
They had plans. Well, the French did, yes. So there was that real stress, and I didn't know that was going on. So I figured I really had to rewrite this, and that took time. But so every time I had business in that part of Boston, I would go over to the archives, take notes, and it was the war. And then they were on microfilm mostly. And sometimes I got to see the real manuscripts. They were still pasted into these scrapbooks by Victorian or turn of the 20th century archivists who were not using reversible techniques, but they have since been archivally properly preserved.
Right.
And you look at it on microfilm, which is mostly what I did. So there were court cases where people are suing each other, and then there's the regular activity that the legislature is going through, and the privateer problem, the war problem, the debts because of the war problems, and just the minutiae of government, all of which it did relate to what else was going on with the eventual witch trials. And the cast of characters keeps overlapping because, like Judge Hawthorne, who lived right behind us, by the way, right around here.
Really?
Yes, his house was just to the side of us here. He was the representative to the provincial legislature, so he'd be back and forth in Boston and answering roll call and so on. And the other people who were on the actual witch trial panel of jurists are legislators too, so their names keep showing up in roll call.
So the lawmakers.
The lawmakers.
We're sitting in on the jury. They were the jury.
They were the judges.
They were the judges.
It was a panel of judges, and then there's the jury of citizens, guys. They're all men, of course.
Yeah.
The cast of characters is there, and you find out what else they're doing and what the other concerns are. So naturally, that took more time to write. It's a good thing I found that source. Otherwise, the book wouldn't have been worth much of anything.
Yeah.
Because it just repeated what had been in print. And little did I know that Mary Beth Norton, who's a professor at Cornell, was working on the war aspect of it. At the same, books came out the same month.
Oh wow!
Thank goodness, I didn't want it was competition, but they tended to be reviewed at the same time. And thank goodness I knew this revelation that there was a war going on.
Yeah.
So that was interesting because it was kind of in the air that this was important and needed to be considered.
Collective unconscious.
Yeah.
Parallel thought.
We both were looking into the war.
Right.
So, and then it took more time to submit it to an editor and get rejected, submit it to another editor and get rejected, because I didn't have an agent then. And finally, somebody saw it who liked it. And it was going to come out in 2001, but then it got postponed. Thank goodness, because 9/11 happened, and tragedies that are happening while we speak certainly take precedence over a book that's coming out. And it gave me more time to do things. It took enough time, so it came out in 2002, and in 2001, Massachusetts formally cleared the names of the last of the people who had been wrongly convicted.
That took a few years.
It did. It took a few years. Well, the survivors, because more people were found guilty than were executed. There were people with sort of a death sentence hanging over their head when the whole panic stopped, and they didn't know if and when. Opinions were changing at that time, but they didn't know
People were
if
getting
and when
paid off.
They were
People were
what?
getting paid off. Pay off the right legislature.
Well,
person.
no, it's just that this is obviously going wrong, and they stopped the trials and reconsidered what proved you were guilty and what didn't.
Let's talk about that, because I know that in your book, the referencing of time is very small.
It's just a few months.
Just a few months.
You're
Can
right.
you detail that for me?
Oh yeah. Well, the panic started. Well, the first of the legal aspects of it was the end of February 29th. It was a leap year.
Oh.
When the first complaint was registered with the magistrates here in Salem that there was possible witchcraft going on in Salem Village, which was the rural part of town.
Okay.
It's now Danvers, Middleton area.
Okay. And
Salem keeps getting divided up. Most of those towns were larger than them now.
so February 29th, 1692.
92.
So Columbus was here 1492.
1492.
So 200 years after
200
ish.
years after. And it's like the third generation of settlers in this area.
Okay.
And let's see, so the first hearing, it's not a trial, it's a hearing, is in Salem Village. The magistrates go up to,
Oh, like a bench hearing?
well, they're asking questions and trying to see, is this worth holding the person for trial?
Yeah, bench, yeah.
Or letting them out on bail, but if they're doing the devil's work by magic, they're too dangerous to let out on bail.
They should be given a
Yeah.
a reality show.
Well, nowadays it might work. So that was on March 1st, and there's 3 people questioned.
So the next day?
The next
The
day.
very next day?
Well, a smaller population, and
Yeah.
it seemed like an
Less to
emergency.
do? Okay.
Well,
No internet?
no, but there had also been a terrific attack on York, Maine, which isn't that far away, by the French-Canadian forces a month before.
Okay.
So
Everybody's riled up?
everybody is riled up. Yeah, you don't know what's going to happen next, and now it seems it's not just the French and the Indians, it's possibly the devil and his minions too.
Ah,
And everyone's against them.
right. Well, nobody likes the devil.
Well, no. And yeah, so old grudges and suspicions all came to the fore, and people were wondering, who's out there working their evil ways. And some of the girls in the village, in the minister's household, had been acting oddly since the end of January. And they had treated it as a physical illness.
What was oddly?
Well, they had pains here and there, their heads hurt, they were making odd noises, they were creeping under the furniture. I mean, it sounds like a game, but there must have been something different about it, because the adults wouldn't take nonsense from little girls, but they seemed to treat it as an illness. Maybe they had tried fortune telling or something, that's one of the theories, and they knew they weren't supposed to do that, so they felt guilty and, were kind of reacting to that. Or it was a game that went too far and then they didn't dare stop it. I think they actually scared themselves about something. Or there's something that just didn't get written down that we don't know about, in addition to all the other stresses.
How old were the girls?
10 and 12, or 9 and 11. And then there were 2 others, one who's 11 or 12, and an older girl in other parts of the village. So on March 1st, there's 4 supposedly afflicted by witches, who are testifying as to apparitions that had hurt them, and the witch suspect was doing it.
Okay.
So there's 3 people questioned. 2 of them say they all say they didn't do it. But one of them is the minister's slave woman, Tituba, who's always described as an Indian. And so if she's enslaved, she has really no protection at all.
Right.
The others are not in a good position either, but she has even less to protect her. So she keeps saying she's not guilty, she didn't do it, and then she's sort of bullied into a verbal corner, so she's says, well, the witch spirits hurt her too. They tried to make me hurt the girls because they said they saw her spirit hurting them.
They blame the black chick.
Yeah. So, and the two other people, one with whom was a beggar, and the other had marital problems.
So they blamed a homeless person, a black chick, and somebody who didn't get along with her spouse?
Well, he beat her, actually, but she was married.
But she didn't get along with him? Is that the way they wrote it down?
Well, they don't say it in the trials, but the other paperwork shows that he slapped her around.
Mm-hmm.
This was her second marriage. He was a bondservant. She bought his time out and married him, so it's kind of scandalous. But the sons of the first marriage thought that he was wrecking the farm that they were supposed to inherit.
It was a land grab. That's what I've heard. A lot of this that happened was a land grab.
Well, in that case, there was land definitely involved. But he's not accused. The sons aren't accusing mother. It's just, I don't know, the gossip was working against her.
Yeah. Small towns will do that if they don't like you.
It's still.
Well, they're still blaming the black person for stuff and
that's
the homeless
true.
folk.
Although she is described as Indian rather than African.
Got it.
And there are other African people who are suspected. So she's sort of backed into a corner, and they take it as confessional. In reading it, it's not, she's saying, I'm a victim, I'm a victim, I'm a victim.
Right.
But then by the next day, she's saying, well, the devil made us do this, and there were these other witches there, and who else is out there? They want to know. So then people are thinking now, we've got 3 locked up where they can't get at us so much, but who else is it? So all the old suspicions start percolating, and other people are eventually talked about and accused and questioned and jailed, and it escalates over the summer.
Escalates over the summer. So for the next, how long is this going on?
Well, another complication. We were between governments because the king had taken away the charter of Massachusetts, and we were sort of acting as if we had one because, London's a long way off, and they wanted things like import-export taxes and quit rents and things we didn't like. The revolution kind of decided a lot of those questions. But the King, William, had just granted a new charter at the end of 91, and it was coming back to Massachusetts, and it didn't arrive until late in May. Reverend Increase Mather had negotiated it. It took years. It's not over, like 3 government changes, a revolution in England. The king got kicked out, another king came in. It wasn't easy, and you don't tell the king, this is what I want. So one thing that had changed was that London got to decide who the governor was going to be. You couldn't vote for governor here anymore. It was going to be imposed on us.
So London was going to vote for the governor of Massachusetts?
Appointed, yeah.
Okay.
Fortunately, Mather was able to get a New England guy in as governor, Sir William Phips, who had a title because he had found sunken treasure, which added to the British treasury tremendously, and he got a knighthood from that.
Okay.
But he was from Maine. He grew up on the frontier. They said he didn't know how to read until he was 21, and his wife taught him. So he was a self-made man, and kind of rough around the edges despite the title. So he comes in as governor.
We got a lobster fishing pirate.
Pretty much.
Who just made a lot of money
Yes.
for England.
Yeah,
he's going to be in charge now.
He's going to be in charge here, and at least he can protect the frontier because he can tell the soldiers.
He knows it.
Yeah, pretty much. He's used to commanding sailors and stuff. He faced down a mutiny once all by himself. He sat on a keg of gunpowder with a couple of pistols and said, unless you shape up, I will blow us all to kingdom come.
So he's a crazy mother. You don't want to mess with him.
Well, you don't want to mess with him.
Okay, got it.
He's kind of two-fisted, but he means well. But while he's not the best choice, but
he'll kill you once, but you'll love it.
Well,
he's a great guy.
He has his good points.
No, I'm sure he does.
But he's off on the frontier overseeing the protection of frontier and building a fort that the king has told him to build
Okay.
in Maine. And while he's away, the lieutenant governor, who got elected here, is in charge of things. The lieutenant governor is William Stoughton, who is also, now that they have a government, they can make a court. It's a temporary court until everything is, the government's really decided, but it is a legal way of having the law continue in a time of turmoil.
So it's like you set up a police station in a FEMA camp.
I guess so.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out.
Well, not quite,
'Cause
but
it sounds
yeah.
like chaos.
Well, it's not quite chaos because they're not thinking clearly when it comes to witchcraft accusations. But the lieutenant governor is the chief justice, William Stoughton.
Okay.
And unfortunately, he's a well-educated man. He's been to Harvard, he's been to Oxford. But he's a politician, really. And he has the unorthodox opinion that a person's specter, which is like a ghost only it's still alive, and the specter is seen apart from your body, that can't happen. Well, excuse me. The orthodox view is humans can't do that. You can't separate your soul from your body unless you're dead.
Right.
But the devil can counterfeit it. And that was the argument from the beginning of people who were accused. It wasn't me, the devil is making it.
I got cloned.
Look, yeah,
I got cloned.
a spiritual clone. It's not really me. But Stoughton had the opinion that that wouldn't happen unless you gave permission to the devil to do it,
And where this,
which would make you a collaborator
Yeah.
and a witch. So if you're...
and this guy went to Harvard?
And Oxford, yes.
Ah, okay.
Well, yeah. Well, everybody then thought that witchcraft and that sort of thing was at least possible. The Puritans, the non-Puritans, the French, the native tribes, the Africans who were captured and brought over as slaves. All the other colonies thought it was at least possible. But Massachusetts, eastern Massachusetts, was panicking at this time because of everything else that happened all at once. And it really went bad. But I do have to say that when the girls started acting oddly in the winter of 91, 92, there was another set of females acting oddly that same winter, and it led to accusations and legal proceedings in New Mexico or Arizona. I'm not quite certain, but it was in one of the Spanish territories. So there were witch trials out there too.
I did not know that.
I learned that a few months ago, as a matter of fact. New information keeps turning up.
Wow.
It wasn't as extensive, but there were accusations and legal proceedings against maybe one or two people.
Do you happen to remember how old were those girls who were
I
acting
think
up
they
out
were
there?
grown women.
Okay.
They might have wanted an abortion, which was forbidden, and it didn't happen right, and they were, rather than admit what they had asked for, they had to they didn't have to, they accused the native woman, an Indian,
Of course.
who was the herbal expert,
Wow.
if I'm remembering it correctly. But it wasn't just Massachusetts, but this got completely out of hand.
Well, how out of hand did it get?
The statistics were about 190 people were at least named,
190 people.
but
Based on no,
well, gossip.
yeah, no evidence, right? Just gossip and...
Spectral evidence.
I'm still mad at you from that stuff you did 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of things.
I'm still pissed you wouldn't marry me.
Well,
She a witch.
there were about 190 suspects. There are 164 people that there's actual paperwork on that has survived. There's a lot of paperwork.
164 people. And how many of those are women? Because I know a few
Most
guys got
of
rounded
them.
up in this too,
Oh
right?
yes, that's true. Because, well, let's see. Well, there were 52 trials. 30 people were found guilty, mostly in the summer of '92 when it was worse.
When it's hot and humid and people are pissy.
They just lost. Yes, people
Yeah.
get real irritable when it's and it was a hot summer and there was a drought, so you had to worry about the farm. And 19 people were hanged.
And 18 of those were women?
No,
17?
five of them were men.
5.
And one of them was a minister.
What did he do?
He might have beaten his wife, so it's
Well, then we're okay with it?
well,
Okay.
not a little more okay than
Did they hang her
otherwise.
too?
No.
Okay, well that's good.
His second wife was the second wife, and the first wife were already dead. He was married to a
Oh.
third wife.
He probably killed him.
Well, childbirth. And
Yeah, he killed him.
Well,
I'm just saying that, I don't know.
well, the neighbors thought he was a little hard on them.
Yeah.
They don't actually say he hit them or anything. They just thought he was kind of critical of them. And it's hard to say, but
Yeah.
that was kind of the reputation. And one of the other guys who was hanged was known to really hit his wife. So he wasn't in Satan's will. He had not made he had made a
Yeah,
pact
if you're
with
beating
Satan,
your wife, you're
but
kind of
he
you
had-
are in cahoots with the devil. As far
but
as
he
I'm
was not a
concerned.
perfect person. And some of the other guys were kind of, they'd hit before they thought it through, and others were not like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there were 5 men,
Mm.
and the rest were women, a third of them. But before Salem, I mean, there were other witch trials in New England.
Down at Rhode Island. Rhode Island hung one.
Not- did they?
Yeah, Rhode Island hung a witch.
Oh.
I think Rhode Island was the last state, actually,
Shoot.
to hang a witch.
Because they tended to be a little more accepting of differences down there with different religious opinions. Connecticut had a big problem.
But this wasn't really a religious thing, was it?
Well,
I mean,
it was a spiritual thing. No,
Yeah.
this is not a religious court. It's just it's a felony, and felons are hanged.
Yeah.
And it was elsewhere in New England, but let's see, about a third of the trials that had to do with witchcraft concerns before 1692, about a third of them were slander suits brought by the person who's being gossiped about against the gossiper, because not only would it ruin your reputation if the neighbors believed this, it could get you hanged.
Yeah.
And they usually won. Your name, your reputation, your honesty meant a lot in those days. So magistrates wouldn't automatically believe that you were guilty because somebody got worked up and said so. But in 92, it just collective panic or something, and it snowballed.
If people's words are believed, obviously you don't want to be the village awful person who's this witch. But see, here's the
don't.
thing, women aren't believed.
Not as
so,
often.
Yeah. So if you got all these guys on the panel, and it's some guy coming in saying,
Well, yeah, the
Susie
jury.
Q down the street is doing this, like, whose side are they going to be on?
Yes, of course, there's no women on the juries, or certainly not on the bench. But a lot of the testimony against the suspects was from other women,
Yeah.
because maybe because they had more interaction with them in daily life, and they just didn't like this neighbor.
Yeah.
Some of them sound like prickly characters, and some,
Independent.
yeah, and well, feisty, and they had a reason to be.
Uppity?
They had a reason to be.
Uppity.
Yeah, that too. Yes.
So you just show up and you say, this one did it, and then they refer to the other women in your village who might be pissed that you make a better
Yeah, well-
pot of gruel.
Well, and then my kid got sick right after she came around.
Oh, my
pretending to be neighborly, and
gosh.
then my kids are at risk.
Oh
Therefore,
my
we have
gosh,
to be
we have to
protected.
save the children
Save the
from this
children.
evil woman.
Yeah, like that.
Whoa.
Um,
And then it didn't last very long, right?
Well,
Because I know the European witch trials went on for
a
a
long
very
time.
long
Oh
time.
yeah, and many more people, and there was burnings on the continent,
They were burning us on the continent.
but not in the England and English colonies. Scotland, yes.
Yeah.
But not England, and not in New England, certainly. There were other cases in like Virginia and Carolinas, but the paperwork isn't there as well as preserving the records. I mean,
Well, I'm Southern. We don't keep receipts. Sorry.
too bad there's good stories there. But there's some, but not enough.
Yeah.
On the other hand, maybe the magistrates figured these yokels don't know what they're doing. If they come
Well, yeah,
from
they're
the
accusing each
backcountry.
other of being damn witches. Of course they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, well, yeah, but there are people, so we have to take them
Y'all need to get a
seriously.
hobby. Okay, so
Right.
our
the time
trials.
span.
Yeah, please.
Well,
forgive
look,
me.
in May we got the charter back. The first trials were in June. The first person to be tried was Bridget Bishop, who had been tried before and apparently acquitted because she's still alive. She was prickly, you might
Yeah.
say. She was, and her second husband slapped her around, and her third husband apparently did not. But he also isn't on record as to speaking up for her either, which is unfortunate. So she is found guilty and is hanged
Hanged.
on the 10th of June, after which one of the judges quits the bench. He apparently disagrees with the way things are going, but he apparently doesn't say much about it, but he quits. And I think that's when they put Hawthorne on as one of the judges. But
They had dirt on him. Something happened. You don't give up power like that.
well, he is in the legislature, they all know him. But then there's more trials, and there's let's see, one in June. 5 are executed in July, 5 in August, including the minister. And then in September, there's 8 people hanged, and there's more people who are waiting to be hanged. So whatever size the gallows was, it apparently wouldn't accommodate more than 8 at a time. And then they stop. In October, there's opposition. People have been speaking up for some of the accused. The neighbors, there were 4 different petitions that people wrote.
Okay.
There was 2 for John and Elizabeth Proctor from their immediate neighbors and from people in Ipswich where he'd grown up, saying he's a good person. Rebecca Nurse, neighbors signed their names for her. And up in Salisbury, Mary Bradbury, who's 80 years old, the neighbors signed a petition for her.
Oh, good.
Yeah, they stood up, and people who spoke up for the witches could be considered collaborating with them, so it was dangerous. Although nothing was done against those individuals.
That's good. That's
Yes,
good to
that
hear.
is. But the petitions were pretty much ignored.
That's bad to hear.
It is bad. The Proctors and Rebecca Nurse were hanged.
Ah.
Mary Bradbury's family got her out of jail somehow. I think, bribery, dig them out under the sill of the building or something, but they got her out and hid her somewhere, so she survives. But there's like 5 more people who have been considered guilty, and obviously the next batch of hangings, they're not going to fare well. But there's opposition because there's 250 people about had signed all those petitions. And Phipps, who's been back and forth, he knows what's going on, but he writes to England saying, I've stopped the trials. This is the 12th of October. He writes it down. He writes to England, we want your advice, Your Majesty, how should we proceed? Because every time there's an accusation and a trial, more people get suspected.
Yeah.
It's snowball. But there's enough opposition so that they pull back. He's cowed enough by the court, by Stoughton, that it takes him a couple of weeks to tell the court they're not going to sit. They have to ask him out. They asked him outright in the legislature, are we going to have trials after this? Well, he's kind of hemmed some haws, and they figure, I guess not, because the next sitting is for November 1st. And like 2 days before, he finally says, no, this is the end of the court. We're going to continue with reorganizing the government, part of which is to have a regular superior court that sits at certain times. So it stops. And it's also cold weather by now, which I think helped. They cooled off.
It's snowing. Y'all go inside.
It actually did snow rather early in October, but there's people in jail. There's 3-4 jails, 2 in Essex County, Middlesex, Suffolk County, and they're full of suspects.
Oh my
And
gosh.
they're not built to be holding people for a long period of time, and not that many people. So the families are petitioning, let Ma out for the winter. We promise we'll bring her back in the spring, and she won't bewitch anybody.
She won't fly away.
No, she won't fly away. But it's cold in there. There's bills for blankets and firewood and stuff. But it's not. There's nothing flushes in these jails. So there's disease.
Yeah.
So by the time it's the end of the year, they figured, and they haven't heard from England yet, they have to do something. So the trials resume with the actual Superior Court now. Same Superior Court we have now, different cast of characters. But Stoughton is still the Chief Justice. They're going to sit in Salem for Essex County in January of '93, but you are not to use spectral evidence. So they try a whole bunch of people, and only 3, which is 3 too many, only 3 are found guilty.
Okay.
And of course they're condemned. And the King's Attorney, which is like the Attorney General, comments in writing that in his opinion, the evidence against those 3 was no different from the evidence against the people last summer, spectral evidence that we are not supposed to pay attention to. So
it's a debunked theory.
It's a
debunked theory to bring into court.
Because the devil is a liar. Even if they saw your specter,
so it's debunked.
You can't believe it.
But this dip is still throwing it into the fire.
Well, for some reason, Stoughton found that believable. So the next
it is unbelievable.
The next setting is for Middlesex County in the beginning of February. I think.
So this is about a year past when we originally started.
When they started acting oddly, the girls. So at the beginning of February, the court convenes in Charlestown, which was in that county then. The boundaries have changed. And I think the 1st of February was supposed to be the next batch of hangings. There's evidence that points to that.
Okay. There's a flyer. Come to the show.
Well,
2-drink minimum.
Other evidence. But Phipps is in disagreement with Stoughton, who Phipps is not educated. Stoughton is educated. Stoughton is the politician.
Well, he sounds overeducated and stupid.
Well, he's never wrong, you understand.
Well, it's kind of an elite attitude, isn't it?
So Phipps has argued with him publicly, lost his temper in front of the legislature over a completely unrelated matter that has to do with extradition to New York or some political
So these
credit.
guys are playing who's is bigger kind of situation.
Well,
you know what I'm saying? Like
the governor is supposed to be the boss. This is the lieutenant governor, but then he's also the...
And one got voted in and one got appointed.
Yeah.
So there's
the personality clash.
Got it.
So there's going to be hangings the next day, apparently. But Phipps finally is fed up with Stoughton, and without telling him, because he's not quite brave enough to face him, he sends a message to Salem to stop the hangings the next day. Wait until we get word from England as to what to do. So at the last minute, the reprieve, the tension must have been awful.
Yeah.
So the next day, they're in court in Charlestown, and Stoughton hears about this, knows it's good. Phipps has gone behind his back.
He got cooked.
Oh boy, was he mad.
Yeah.
So he storms off the bench. He says, I don't know who's behind this. He knew who was behind it. But this advances the devil's work. And he leaves the courtroom and goes across the river, waits for the ferry, and goes to Phipps's house in the north end of Boston.
Whoa!
And we don't know what they said, but it would have been great to hear. So there was a dust-up of some sort.
He left the court to go to that dude's house, huh?
Yeah, so the second in command...
Men are so emotional.
Oh, he was.
Marilynne.
He was. You sort of see him as...
They get so emotional.
Yeah, he was contradicted.
Yeah.
In front of people and countermanded, and he took it badly. So he didn't come back to that court. It wasn't as lengthy as the one in Salem. So the people who were up for witchcraft cases for that county, some of them seem awfully suspicious, but not enough to condemn anybody. So nobody is found guilty.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. And then there's a sitting for Suffolk County in Boston in April. Nobody is found guilty. Stoughton's back. I can just imagine him sitting there, stony face.
Like Mr. Burns.
Oh, a little smoke coming out of his ears, maybe. And then in May, another sitting in Essex County in Ipswich, which is the other town that they have court cases in, and nobody is found guilty, and that's the end of that.
So America was lucky
Lucky. Phipps
compared
lost
to
his
other.
temper.
Yeah.
If it hadn't been for that, it would have been more people hanged.
If it hadn't been for Phipps, the lobster farmer pirate dude.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course, it would have helped if he had stepped in sooner, but there are still people who would have been hanged, who still have this hanging over their head. What if the king says keep going? What if the neighbors get worked up again? But people return home after they pay the jail fees, because you had to pay room and board, which some people didn't come up with soon enough, and a few of them died waiting, but
They died waiting for justice.
they were old and sick by the time their cases came up, so
That
it
still
did not
happens.
work well. So the king's answer, the Privy Council's answer, comes back in May saying, do what you think is best. But Phipps takes this as approval of his stopping the trials, and that's the end of it. But the people who have already been condemned, nobody wants to talk about it for a while, because let's not bring that up. The neighbors might get funny again.
Yeah.
And the people who realized it had gone so wrong, you don't want to talk about it because it's so embarrassing. We did it so wrong. And some people thought it was all being swept under the rug, and there really was a plot from the devil. That would, I think, be the minority. But after a couple of decades went by, the people who had survived and were still alive, or the families of the bereaved families of those who had been hanged, petitioned the government to clear the names of the people who had been condemned, whether they were alive or dead, so that this awful blow to their reputation wasn't there, and
Sure.
the people who were still alive could be certain the neighbors weren't going to bring all that up again.
Well, yeah, because you got that family name.
That
You don't
fam-
want grief 20 years down the road.
Right.
Yep.
And maybe the death sentence would be reactivated if
Who knows?
You didn't know.
I mean, you're basing all this on nonsense and
Well,
conjecture.
spectral evidence, the devil's lies.
Yeah, well.
So finally, by 1711, the then governor signed a reversal of attainder, which meant that the condemnation of their names was lifted. They were not guilty of it. Their names were cleared. Not everybody had been involved with the petitions to do this. Some people were out of the loop, and there were names that were left out. Of course, by then, nobody in the government wanted to touch such an embarrassing subject, but you don't know that until things don't happen. But there was a move in the 1950s by a descendant of one of them, Wilmot Red of Marblehead, to clear his great-great-grandmother's name. And the legislature made some sort of a statement saying, in effect, well, it's a different government, it was under British rule then, but we think it was awful. And finally, in the late 20th century, a group in Essex County wanted to just clear this up. It was after the tricentennial of the trials. And it was proposed to the legislature to clear their names by name, so that, because one of them in the reversal of attainder was John Proctor and wife, and she had a name. And she had survived, too, Elizabeth Proctor.
Yeah. Did he?
No, unfortunately, no. No, that's the couple in the Crucible, except Arthur Miller made up the situation for that. So finally, it went through the legislature, and the acting governor, Jane Swift, a woman, in 2001 signed the act saying they were not witches. Unfortunately, she decided to do this on October 31st, which is Halloween, which kind of doesn't take it too seriously if you confuse the actual witch trials with the enjoyment and traditions of Halloween. But anyway, it got done.
Yeah.
And that took time.
It sounds like it. That took, shoot,
but
A few centuries
about
to clear names.
2 centuries plus, yeah.
Just to get something done, and they did it.
Yeah,
on-
well, it wasn't us
on the
doing it. It
Halloween.
was another ignorant generation, or it was under British rule. I think at one point the descendant of the Wilmot Red had petitioned the Crown, and Elizabeth II's government said, in effect, well, you have your own government
just
now,
kept
deal
passing
with
the
it.
buck,
Yeah,
right?
it's not us anymore.
But that got fixed.
But then again, the Privy Council told Phipps, do what you think is best.
So everybody was just, you do it, no, you do it, no,
Yeah,
you do it.
it's
Same
embarrassing.
stuff that goes on now.
And it's all still held against New England. Oh, excuse me.
Well,
it's still held against New
You know,
England.
I want to ask you about that actually, because, you know, to me, I mean, I'm from the South. The Confederate statues
Oh, yeah.
belong in a museum.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about it.
Okay. I like the horses.
The horse
mounted
statues.
horses.
They're beautiful. They're beautiful statues. It wasn't, in my opinion, a beautiful cause. It's nothing to celebrate,
Right.
but it is part of our history,
It is.
and it should be remembered.
Yes.
I'm all for tearing down the name Salem. Why aren't we renaming this city something different when it stands for?
Well, it stands for other things too. It's not the only thing that happened.
Yeah, but you got women testifying against women, children testifying against their own moms, magistrates who
happened in
don't know
other
what's
places.
going on. I know, but
well,
it did happen. But we all know Salem is
Right.
synonymous with this for America.
It is, and beyond too,
Yeah.
because of Arthur Miller.
Yeah.
Partly.
But that's the thing. Like every time I drive, anywhere in the country, and I see a Salem, this state,
Right.
Salem, that state, I'm like,
Well, I don't know. Salem
'Cause
Village, Village is now Danvers, and it's said that they wanted to distance themselves from that because that's where it started.
yeah.
On the other hand, all those villages that broke off from towns, like Rowley Village became Boxford, and they weren't ashamed of being part of Rowley. There was no particular scandal.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much of that was part of it. It means the city of peace, as in as in Jerusalem, Salem.
Yeah, no, I get it.
But
I speak some
it's
Hebrew.
something to aspire to.
This is a beautiful city.
is.
I'm charmed. I've never been here before. I'm
Well,
excited to be here.
It wasn't the whole of their identity.
True that.
I'm not from Salem, but I really like it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, later it was big in the Revolution.
How's that?
The privateering, a lot of privateering out of Salem.
What's that?
Oh, it's legalized pirates. It's when the government can commission a ship to take enemy ships. There wasn't an actual navy. And before that, during the French and Indian War and in 1692, in fact, there were New England licensed privateers to take French shipping, for example.
Okay.
And there were also French-Canadian ships that took New England shipping.
So this is a city that's synonymous with
Pirates,
burning
yes.
uppity women
They
and
don't-
pirates.
No Let me clarify that. There's no burning.
It's a good Halloween costume around
Oh
here.
yeah, well, it's a civil court. It's a felony, and they're hanged.
Well, you can
which
call it
is
civil
no
court,
picnic,
but,
But there's no burning.
It's a hanging. It's much more civilized.
Yeah, it doesn't take quite as long, but it's
There's
not.
no evidence really against you, but we're not going to set you on fire.
You had to be there at the time.
Oh, I sometimes feel like I
so
have been.
real, they were saying, but they knew they were wrong.
No, it's beautiful. It's quaint here. It's gorgeous.
I love
and
it.
I mean, for anybody who's never been here, it's lovely. It's
It is.
cobblestone sidewalks and super friendly people, and a lot of gardening getting done.
yes.
So they're all
Yes.
about their
Pretty
beautification
gardens.
projects. And I'm drinking coffee with soy milk, so I'm happy about that.
You can get soy milk.
You can get soy milk. And I thank you so much for giving up your morning to come meet with
Oh,
me
my pleasure.
and share this part of our history that I don't think we really learn about. You just told me so many things I had no idea about.
And there's a lot more.
I know. 27 years worth just for one book. And you've written how many?
Well, there's 2 books on Salem that are in print.
Mm-hmm.
There's a young adult children's book before that on the daily life that's out of print. And I've written articles.
Yes. And you've been on the Daily Show
I
with Jon
was,
Stewart.
yes, that was fun.
I'm going to encourage people to look up that clip.
It's archived, yes.
I'm sure you were lovely on that because you're lovely here.
Thank you. It helped that I didn't know what I was getting into.
Well,
But
do
he was
we
great.
ever?
He was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Marilynne, what are the names of your books and how can people find them?
The one that took 27 years to write is The Salem Witch Trials, a day-by-day chronicle of a community under siege, which tells everything I could fit into it. And the second one that's out is 6 Women of Salem, which is a biographical focus on 6 specific individuals who lived through the trials, or didn't, as the case may be.
Yeah.
And, well, they're on Amazon and in bookstores.
All right. So the truth is out there.
Well, I try.
What other things can people experience here in Salem,
Oh, yeah,
Marilynne?
The Peabody Essex Museum, which is art, history, artifacts, that's excellent.
Yeah.
There's the National Maritime Site that the government runs, which is the wharfs and the customs house that Nathaniel Hawthorne worked in before he hit the big time in writing. It's very interesting. The architecture and the history goes into the privateering and the pepper trade and the China trade. And also of the presentations I would recommend personally, the Salem Witch Museum, which is, as a disclosure, I'm working with them to make the narration more historically accurate.
That's going to be wonderful. I'm looking forward to that.
So
That's quite a list of things.
it is, and just walking around and looking at the architecture is really nice.
Yeah, it's beautiful here.
It is.
I want to thank Gullah Gullah Cafe for having us here on their beautiful sidewalk section, enjoying this fall morning. I'm very appreciative, and I just want to thank you for 27 years of your life going into one project.
Well, there's still more information turning up.
Well, we'll go find some.
Thank you.
Thank you. And please look for Marilynne online. She is in the process of building her own website. Marilynne with 2 N's and 1 E.
Marilynne K. Roach, ROACH.com, but it's not up yet.
But it will be soon.
Yeah.
She's busy right now. She's making brooms and saging.
Yes.
Hey, this is Lisa Landry. Thank you so much, Marilynne Roach. You're amazing. Thank you so much for joining me here today, y'all. Come back next week for Womanist Wednesday. And yes, Ari, you can play with the broom, but make sure you don't put your eye out with it, all right?